Thank you. Excellencies, Dato, members of MASSA, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamualaikum and a very good morning to everyone. It is indeed my great pleasure to welcome all of you to this webinar on environmental, social, and governance, ESG for short, as well known by now, and its adoption in Malaysia. As mentioned earlier, jointly organized by the Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport of Malaysia, the Malaysian Association of Public Advocacy of Nature, and of course, MASSA. The webinar is aimed at providing insights on the current developments in ESG spectrum in Malaysia, to equip Malaysian businesses with practical insights and inputs from industry experts and peers who have made or are in transition to adopt ESG in their operations. In 2015, the Paris Agreement on Climate Change and the adoption of the UN Sustainable Development Goals under the 2030 Agenda of Sustainable Development launched sustainability on its path to become one of the public consciousness, or part of public consciousness. Since then, we have witnessed many developments in ESG, which include the carbon border agreement mechanism by the EU, underscoring the what they call decarbonization commitments by governing bodies, and placing ESG issues and compliance on a bigger spotlight for the global economy. Against this backdrop, companies worldwide, from the largest to the smallest of businesses, are compelled to make the necessary ESG compliant transition. Malaysia is not exempted from this. Our government continues to stress and enhance and accelerate ESG compliance and adoption among industries through its policies. By the way, I think Malaysia is committed to the 2050, I think, compliance, that's a zero carbon thing. But anyway, this policy include the new investment policy, the recently announced National Energy Transition Roadmap, the new Industrial Master Plan, and National Industry Environmental, Social and Governance Framework for the manufacturing sector, which will be launched by MITI October, well, next month. The heightened awareness and appreciation of ESG issues has yet to be fully translated into business practices, as many businesses are facing challenges and uncertainties in implementing what seems to be a daunting task, underlying complying with the numerous and seemingly separate ESG practices. That's what we call it. And also standards. It is our hope that the panel of experts and practitioners this morning will enlighten you and give you the relevant and actionable insights to, to spur your next steps on the ESG journey. I would like to share with you some of my observations on this matter. Businesses are already going in the direction of ESG compliance, and that ESG compliance can be further complemented and accelerated through pre-existing business practices, current practices, such as digitizing business processes by going paperless, reducing emissions through savings of power usage, or even focusing on talent retention and development through emphasizing employee well-being. Businesses practicing corporate social responsibility, CSR, or maintaining compliance with international standards, such as ISO, are already on, at least partly, if not most of the way, to ESG compliance. I wish to echo the same encouragement for businesses when it comes to digitalization. ESG adoption and digitalization should not be seen as do or die, or either it should be do it and thrive. Companies that prioritizes environmental sustainability, social responsibility, and effective governance can experience the spillover benefits in terms of risk management, financial performance, shareholder relations, access to capital, innovation, and employee satisfaction. The implementation of ESG measures, such as reducing energy consumption or adopting sustainable sourcing services, can also lower operational expenses and improve bottom line profits. Now, please let me give me a moment to introduce to you Malaysia South-South Association. MASSA is a business organization comprising Malaysians business people interested to tap into the business opportunities in the markets of the developing countries, or we call it the South-South countries. The association fosters economic, trade, and cultural relations between Malaysia and developing countries and serves as an informal liaison body between Malaysia and the South-South sectors and the governments. MASSA members over 3 decades have established their business presence with partners in many of the developing countries. The global move towards ESG adoption and compliance, which covers the entire spectrum of decarbonization, renewable energy issues, the green economy, and more, will give rise to potential areas for new businesses to grow and scale up. These businesses can then be expanded to the developing South-South countries to enable them, in one leap perhaps, to address the issue of innovation and ESG compliance. On behalf of MASSA, I thank CILT and MAPAN for their efforts in organizing this webinar. And I would like to thank IJM Corporation for agreeing to speak and share their ESG adoption journey and insights with other participants today. With these words, Once again, thank you everyone for being here with us in the webinar. I wish you all a fruitful interactions and deliberation. Thank you. Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam. Thank you, Yang Bahagia Tan Sri, for a heartfelt welcome to our distinguished panelists and all participants. Let us embark on this enlightening journey to explore the vital role of ESG in shaping Malaysia's future. I welcome Madam Reshma to start the webinar.
Thank you very much, Farah. Assalamu alaikum. Good day, good morning, everybody. Welcome to our, to be honest, this is not going to be the one-off session because we have a bunch of other sessions also in line for you. We're going to look at different perspectives on how ESG is adopted within the Malaysian business landscape. So welcome to the inaugural session. Today is the inaugural session. And we're very lucky. We have the privilege of communicating, conversing, and understanding the journey that IJM Corporation Bhd, who we all know is a very prominent player in the field of construction, property development, industrial ventures, and road infrastructure development as well. So today we will dive into the ever-evolving landscape of ESG, as you have heard, and we'll look at the dynamics of that within the Malaysian context, as ESG has become a very indispensable factor for businesses' successes in today's fiercely competitive and rapidly changing market. And of course, the ever-looming story of the climate change, and don't we know and don't we feel it? So in light of that, I would like to first ask our first speaker to come in to give us an overview of what ESG, because honestly, people are still grappling with what ESG is. So allow me to introduce Mr. Ben Ong. Mr. Ben Ong is the founder and chairman for MAPAN. MAPAN is Malaysian Association of Public Advocacy for Nature. And Ben is one man who can give you a big picture and insight, and also keep us abreast on what the government is doing at this point of time. So Ben, can I please pass the mic to you? And maybe you can introduce yourself as well, since I didn't go in through all that. Over to you, Ben.
Thank you, Resma. Let me get to my slide.
Sure. May I ask the other panelists to please turn your mic off, because whoever speaks while we are on the panel, their picture will appear and we'll lose Ben. So if you could do that, thank you very much. Yeah, Ben, I can see it and we can all see it. Please go ahead.
Salam pagi, Tan Sri. Salam pagi, Ambassador, and all participants, panelists, MASSA, our CILT, as well as members from MAPAN. The American pronunciation for MAPAN, MAPAN. Today we are here to have a quick conversation. My role is to open the curtain as to this light think of ESG. ESG gives a good feeling. Good things are ahead of us, but to go down to acting on it is a little bit of an issue. That's where we are today. For me, my background is supply chain as well as digitization. These are the two areas that we can't live without if we are talking of environmental, social, and governance. A very quick introduction as why MAPAN is around. Basically, we are here to handhold, especially MSME. In Malaysia, we have 97.4% of the total business establishments coming from micro, medium, and small industries. About 48% of the employment actually comes from MSME. And MSME contributed about 38% of our GDP. We are a young NGO as well as a non-profit organization. Currently, we have only founding members, meaning to say they are the expert team for which we want to formulate so as we can have experts to lead the industry forward. 30% of our membership are female, half of which of our members are actually from academia, the other half are from the industry. Currently, we have 30 professors with us, with another 90 professionals, including Puan Resma, and quite a number of CILT pioneer members. 26 local and foreign universities, private or public, they are in our membership. Today, we've done something like 100 events. Some of them online, offline, on our own, with other people, international, domestic. And we have also published 20 sustainability articles on a green magazine. We have 16 HRDF approved courses for ESG training, meaning to say employer can send their employees and claim from the levy. And we have published also a survey which were endorsed by 5 of our professors. We have a book which has been launched internationally just very recently in MITI, together with our foreign partner, AIM, annual investment meeting, AIM, from Dubai. How can each of us contribute to ESG? ESG is basically a community engagement program, whereby we see that the carbon are basically generated from the ground. The staff on the floor, assuming if you are in transport, the lorry drivers, if you're in the warehouse, the forklift drivers, or maybe you use other equipment. So by narrowing down to the level of your workers is where the gist of decarbonization is. Whatever that we know of today, like what Tan Sri has mentioned in the opening statement, must be actionable. Otherwise, sustainability become, a frame on the wall. This is the session that we had in mind with our foreign partners signing the MOU. The value of ESG actually become very prominent simply because of investments, in particular foreign direct investments, for which every country, including Malaysia, are chasing after. Because we are a small nation with 33 million people and our market size is small. In whatever business that we do, we talk of economies of scale. That is where FDI become something very important. I mentioned about community engagement. That literally means collaborations between all the stakeholders, between the ecosystems. We cannot only have people who are from the top management, and we need also the middle management, as well as the people who are on the ground, who really know if I drive less of my lorry and I increase the capacity each time that I make a trip, that is contributing to carbon reduction. For Malaysia, ESG compliance is non-mandatory. It is voluntary even for MNCs, GLC, GLIC, or large corporate. But if you are a PLC on Bursa Malaysia, then Bursa require you by next year to comply to ESG. And this is a framework that Bursa rate PLC. There are 3 components, as we know. Under environment, you have supply chain. So supply chain people, like all the members in CILT, important players in moving the ESG movement everywhere. So you have also supply chain social. Supply chain dominates two pillars of ESG, both on the environmental side, that includes things like pollution, things like water security, and the social aspect, whereby, let's say, minimum pay, let's say the HSSE, the health, safety, environment, and security, and also a responsibility towards your customer. That is social. Governance-wise, we have, of course, a lot of ISO standards currently taking care of things like anti-corruption. We have MCCG, Malaysian Code of Corporate Governance. If you are a listed company, then you are duty bound. When it comes to MSME, our focus from MAPAN's perspective is that of how to make sure that the 97% of the industries, whether they are in services or in manufacturing, are ESG compliant. And by having the PLC ESG compliant by next year, it will literally means, regardless of the size of your business, as long as you deal with PLC, you need to start collecting your carbon data, because all subcontractors, vendors, they supply, most of them supply to PLC. And PLC will require the scope 3 from this category of industries to complete their ESG reporting. In the disclosure statement, there are 3 scopes: scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. Scope 1 are the own in-house emission. If you are manufacturing or you are service industries, then you have scope 1. Scope 2 basically refers to electricity that you buy. In the office, you need to run your computer. In the factory, you need to run your machine. So you buy electricity. That is scope 2. But we are aware, most listed companies, they basically outsource a lot of non-core activities to MSME. That's where, if we are able to tackle MSME and give them a good hand-holding for them to transition into compliance, bringing about low carbon economy, then basically we are achieving our nationally determined contributions, NDC, for 2030. In Malaysian's case, it's 45% of our national GDP. And by 2050, we're supposed to achieve carbon neutrality. And if 97% are there, the country is neutral. Coming back to this pyramid, ESG has got 3 so-called major components. The first is regulations. Like Security Commission is currently promoting ISSB, which is an international accounting standard that takes care of non-financial reporting, including climate change. This is where ISSB has become a call for Security Commission, to really introduce to our PLC. Apart from the regulation, which currently is voluntary in most part of the world, EU, America, they have regulations. So when the regulation comes in, means ESG for businesses, any businesses, it is do or die, you follow. You follow, do or die. It's a survival issue. Then you have these reporting frameworks that in the case of Bursa Malaysia, Bursa actually recommended TCFD, which is a standard that covers climate impact on businesses. A lot of us may not be aware that climate change has got so much bearing, on the smallest business that we know of. Your staff may not be able to come to work because of flood. And flood are very rare in the past, but commonly and so frequent today. And your goods cannot go out because your factory in front of the main road flooded. So the truck cannot come in, the truck cannot get out. So you have a supply chain issue. Then finally, in the big spectrum of ESG, then you talk of global goals. My personal feel is our priority, especially for smaller entities, is to remove carbon if at all possible. By removing carbon means we are having higher chances of reaching net zero, because currently our emissions are more than the removal. So for smaller businesses, they should concentrate more on the standard, the mid part of this pyramid. The international goals, leave it to the bigger guys to do. In Malaysia, we have a classification by SME Corp, which MAPAN happens to do some work for them. We have conducted 2 training, and we are going to do 1 more training in Bintulu, October the 19th. So this is a classification, and there are 2 major distinctions. SME Corp segregate manufacturing as one, and other, including services, the other domain. So in terms of turnover and in terms of employees, there are some difference. Manufacturing, you have bigger turnover, bigger staff size, in order for you to group into whether you are medium, whether you are small, or whether you are micro. And between the MSME so-called horizon, micro makes up the most numbers. Most numbers in terms of the employment, because the gig industry basically falls under micro. That's where MDEC is doing quite a fair bit of work, to change our landscape. Carbon tax. Tan Sri has cleverly mentioned about CBAM, which is so critical for exporters. In Malaysia, regardless of the size of your business turnover, chances is if you are a long-term businesses or you are already established, you will be exporting some part of your products to EU nation. And EU has got a very strict regulation whereby they will impose tax on your product. So if you sell, say, 10 ringgit here, by the time you go there, it could become 13 ringgit. 30% coming from the tax. So if you don't do anything today, when the time you want to export, you suddenly realize, you lose 3 Malaysian ringgit. I recently written a paper on this at ESG magazine, outlining our BCX. BCX is a good place whereby in the midterm, you can actually mobilize capital, turn your asset, invest onto this exchange, and buy some credits, to offset against whatever unabatable emission that you have now. Because for you to reduce carbon, example, maybe you may plant some bamboo trees, and bamboo will be able to sink some of the carbon, but it will take time. So in the interim, what do? In order that at least you are neutral. Because individually, if every business is neutral, the country as a whole is neutral. Individual person, the carbon creation are not much. It is all because of economic activities that you accumulate much more carbon than the country can shoulder. I want to talk a little bit about halal, Sharia, which Malaysia is at the forefront of the international scene. Our BCX is the only Sharia compliant carbon exchange in the world. And our BCX happens to be ahead of quite a number of nations around us. Indonesia just started their exchange. Taiwan did it a few days ago. But we actually started March and we have the first auction. Yesterday, there was another transaction where 16,550 Vera registered credits were sold. So in that sense, halal or Sharia has, a competitive advantage for the country. So whoever involved in halal trade, they should take this advantage. And in principle, the Sharia concepts, a lot of the Sharia concept in terms of transparency, in terms of ethical values, in terms of honesty, in terms of absolute hygiene, are all elements of ESG per se. We wanted to become a knowledge hub. That's why we have our founding members who are at least holding a bachelor degree to be our founding members. And because of our connection with the 26 universities and the 13 nationalities, although we are just a Malaysian national organization, we have international reach. So what we wanted to do is to bring the job of ESG down to the ground. So as a small company, maybe just having 2 staff and doing a turnover of say 300,000 a year, how can they start? We want to make it very simple and very down to earth. However small the company must have a mission, a vision, and a quality objective. And these are the strategic core. When we say ESG is a strategic tool, and we also say that ESG must be so-called assimilated into the company's sustainability plan, then we have to start by drawing a small little map to narrow down as to this particular company, which industry vertical are they in? Are they in transport? Are they in, say, manufacturing of solar panel? Because different industry would have different material points. If I am in beverage industry, what is material to me is water. So water conservation will bring me a lot of carbon credit point. This is where materiality, sustainability plan, as well as the industry where the company is in are important. Because by so doing, then you can narrow down to pick an international standard that is most suitable to you, most cost effective, and most efficient, whereby by doing just a few important things, you can get your carbon reduced already. Rather than you go round and round, without knowing where are you positioned. This is where, we have taken some time to come up with what we call, the A to Z ESG kickoff ebook, because we are talking of low carbon. So we do not want to create paper all over the places. And being ebook, meaning to say it can be updated quickly, because ESG as a knowledge is dynamic, and climate keep changing. So the so-called the solution or the resolution, must be as fast to catch up, with the changing dynamics or the changing environments.
Ben, can I just ask you to keep to time, Ben, if possible?
Well,
maybe another minute or two. I know you're coming to the end already of your presentation, Kan.
This is the last page. We want to give hope to ESG. So hopefully every one of us is a warrior. At home, you try to use less of aircon. You walk more, you spend less, you spend less petrol. That's the message that MAPAN is trying to disseminate, that not only you are in the business, or you are a boss, or you are an employee at home, you can also contribute to ESG. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ben. Very interesting because you took the audience through in terms of understanding what ESG is all about. You explained the scopes to them. You gave ideas on how MSMEs will have no choice anyways. As PLCs get there, MSMEs will have to pretty much learn up, adopt, otherwise they'll be out of business generally. And at the end of the day, for the PLCs to make their mark, they will generally have to force MSMEs to go about it. And interestingly, you gave some ideas on what MAPAN, right? The American way of saying it, what MAPAN can do in terms of helping MSMEs get started with their ESG. So we'll keep the questions for after our panel of speakers have completed their presentations. Thank you very much, Ben. I'm now going to call our next speaker, who is Mr. Shane Guha Takurta, and he is currently the General Manager under the Investor Relations and Sustainability for IJM Corporation Bhd. And he's going to take us through their journey, the big guy's journey. Over to you, Shane. Hi, Shane, are you here? I see your slide up.
Sorry, I was just going to unmute myself. Thanks,
there you go. Okay.
Thank you for the kind introduction, Reshma. Very good morning to Yang Bahagia Tan Sri Azman, His Excellency Amajit Singh, fellow panelists and distinguished audience. Thank you very much, MASSA, CILT, and MAPAN for inviting IJM to share our sustainability journey with everyone here this morning. I think we're all on various stages of our sustainability journey. So I gather that a lot of our audience this morning are practitioners themselves as small businesses looking to understand the how to go about going through their sustainability respective sustainability journeys, and as well as government agencies who are looking to assist businesses as well along this journey. So I'm going to do it slightly differently. This is not going to be a showcase kind of presentation. This is a little bit more of a peer-to-peer type sharing, where hopefully we can all accelerate our learnings together. So given the time, this presentation is obviously going to serve a little bit more as a teaser than us being able to go in depth into each of these topics. But I would say that I would encourage everyone to take a look at our latest annual report. There's a lot of detail in there as well that hopefully if you read that and listen to me this morning, you should be able to jive, put the two and two together in a better context. And I must seek your apologies as well. I may be using a lot of sustainability terms that I'm familiar with. Maybe not everyone is familiar with, but I apologize for that if I'm doing that a bit too much this morning. So let me first start by giving you a bit of the content of what I'll be going through this morning. At the first instance, we will be talking about giving you a snapshot of IJM's sustainability journey, especially since 2015, and I'll explain why later. And then for number 3, we will be also going through the roadmap that we have, come up with, a 3-year roadmap to guide IJM as a whole organization forward in a coherent manner as well. And then number 4, I will be taking you through some.
I'm so sorry, Shane, but I have some audience who say they can't hear you very clearly. You're coming in rather soft. Do you think you can turn up the volume a bit?
Is that better? I'll switch off my camera as well, Reshma. I think I'm having a little bit of internet.
Yeah, sure, no problem. It'll definitely help if you turn the camera off. Maybe your bandwidth would be better. Go ahead. Okay. Sorry to bother you in between.
No. Thanks for highlighting this early. So number 4, we will be going through some of the key drivers we think that have shaped our approach today. More recent drivers, of course. And then number 5, how these drivers have led us to our sustainability or climate strategy in particular, which we have called the R2O. It's a play on the CO2 chemical formula. Obviously, sustainability covers a very wide range of topics, but I'll be zooming into more the carbon reduction commitments that we've made since March this year, as well as perhaps sharing some of our broader climate assessments, where we've undertaken a 1.5-year study of our climate risk and opportunities. As I feel these two areas go hand in hand together, that formulates our climate strategy. And they're very consequential for businesses today. And I think this is the part where most of us tend to struggle in, because it's a bit more technical and it's very forward-looking, and there's a lot of uncertainty as well when it comes to climate risk and opportunities. And again, you can find some of these outcomes in the annual report. But today, what I'll be sharing with you is more the thought process and the behind the scenes sharing with some practical examples. So before that, let me share with you, IJM at a glance, just to give you a little bit of context. We are, as Reshma pointed out in the early part of the introduction, a construction conglomerate, primarily based out of Malaysia. We're a listed company. I think we're number 50 or so amongst the top listed companies in the country. Our midstream part of the business is where we do civil construction works. That's the mainstay of IJM. We've also got a very prominent property development arm. That's the downstream part of our business. We've also got another downstream part of our business called what we call the infrastructure business, which is typically concession business, where we have toll concessions as well as a port concession in the Kuantan port. And then in the upstream part of our business, we've got what we call the industry division, which is essentially our building materials side of the business. And this is where my colleague Chan comes from. And so he will be sharing with you right after this some of his efforts to sort of give you a glimpse of what the upstream part of our industry is doing to try and reduce our respective carbon footprints as well. So you can see IJM being represented in a very broad manner across the whole construction value chain in Malaysia and in overseas. Now, this slide is sort of give you a snapshot of our journey since 2015. Why since 2015? I would say this was the inflection point of our sustainability journey. And I think for most corporate Malaysian companies, Malaysian corporate companies, when Bursa made it mandatory for large companies above 2 billion market cap to sort of alter 1 billion market cap to produce sustainability reports by the year end 2015. Prior to this, our sustainability statements were mainly CSR type statements, where we were showcasing a lot of our philanthropic efforts. Whilst I would say, if you look at the journey that we have taken through since 2015, at the bottom, you'll see the developed framework aligned to global standards, address reporting gaps. What we found was, as a large company, IJM had all this, had placed high priority in areas of corporate governance, for example, health and safety, employee well-being. These were all areas that we practiced. These were considered best practices, but they were never housed under the umbrella of sustainability. So while we did all of these, we did not capture them under the sustainability agenda, nor did we actually collect the data that was required. So, even things like switching off the lights, reducing waste, these were all good practices, but we did it from a commercial standpoint. We didn't do it from a sustainability standpoint, and we didn't necessarily measure, how much energy we saved, for example. We just measured the dollar that we saved, right? So during these years, what we did was, there was a lot of us capturing data, putting all these data together to align with global standards, reporting standards, of course. And so addressing reporting gaps was more to do with this point of us doing but not reporting on them. So these earlier years were mainly centered on conforming to GRI standards, the TCFD, SASB. All these were necessary, and we use them, I think, in particular, and this is a constant theme that I'll be touching on as well later on, where we have all these while tried to ensure that sustainability was never driven from a compliance standpoint only, but we use these standards, these frameworks, these guidelines to help us formulate how we can strategically implement sustainability in the organization. So these were guides to us rather than just merely complying to them. And then, of course, in recent years, the last 2 years, for example, we went very, very heavy on our climate assessment, as I'll share with you a little bit more on that. These are highly technical. This is a highly technical area, which I hope that our sharing today will give you a sense of some of that learnings that we ourselves, took 1.5 years to find out, and hopefully you'll see a bit of that by the end of this session. We are guided by a framework. As you can see, there are 4 pillars in the middle: the marketplace, environment, community, and workplace. These are the 4 pillars of our sustainability, 4 areas that we look at. And then just on the same colors but outer rings, you see material topics that within these 4 areas. Each of them are presented and have gone through a materiality assessment, and they are then elaborated in much greater detail in the annual report, which I won't go into today. But essentially, these are the 4 buckets that we measure and manage our sustainability progress on. Obviously, they are mapped to the SDGs as well. That's in the outermost circle. And I think very importantly, over the last couple of years, the sustainability governance framework was also a very necessary thing, where it formalizes the whole management of sustainability within the organization. A large organization like ours, that has to come in. The coherence in practices, in moving, some parts of our businesses are good in certain areas, some are less mature in certain areas. Having a coherent framework sort of lifts the floor for everybody, or the baseline for all parts of the organization moving forward. And so that's, I'll quickly, I won't go into too much detail here. We have a framework. So what we came up with recently, not that recently, this was in FY22, our year end is March, so FY March 22, we came up with a roadmap to help us move the whole agenda forward as a coherent organization. And again, it covers the 4 main pillars of marketplace, environment, workplace, and community. In this morning session, I'll be touching a little bit more on the environment section. In particular, as you can see, establishing a climate strategy, that was a key agenda for us as a group. And then pursue green credentials. This, again, to give you a sense of an example, which I won't be covering here in detail in the slide presentation, but as an example, green credentials at the group level, this is what we cascade, this is what the message that we communicated to all our business divisions, the 4 businesses that you saw earlier, across the construction value chain. Now, for example, if the property arm has then gone on to adopt or interpret this as needing to come up with products going forward to have all of them being at least bronze certified green RE, for example. So all their products are green certified. So it's no longer just us doing it, but needing to show that it's done properly as well. So there is an external certification for this to sort of give added verification to the whole process. Our industry division, for example, is trying to go into green labeling as well as a product to see if we keep pushing that agenda and finally are able to crack a higher percentage of usage of recycled materials in our products, then perhaps there's a certain element of green labeling that will be available to us. For construction, is doing more green buildings. It's also undertaking the kinds of projects that are termed as green, and these are not just our own definition, but again, definition by the likes of FTSE for Good, for example. So these are us trying to drive the agenda, but interpreted differently across the various businesses that we have. What I want to stress on here is the gray box at the bottom, which is, I think, something that Ben alluded to earlier as well, which is the digitalization of the whole sustainability journey. That has become very prominent, which I will cover in the next slide. So let me touch on this a little bit as well. So I think 3 areas that we want to highlight, 3 primary areas that we want to highlight this morning. One is data, right? So I think sustainability has become all about data today. It was always the case, but it's even more so today. And why is this the case, right? If you look at the two sub-bullet points, the first agenda, there is a need for us to measure internal reporting, internal measurement, internal management of our sustainability performance, as well as conforming to then global standards or the external reporting parts of sustainability. Both of these are somewhat, there are slight differences. So when we talk to our colleagues at the project levels and across the organization, we tend to focus them a lot more on the first sub-bullet point where we are talking to them about actionable, measurable performances. At the group level, me and my team then look at how do we report on all this in a manner that is conforming to all the global standards that are there. So we see them in two different parts. I'll go through this a little bit more detail later on. And then the second bullet point is this shift in the conversation from mainly the impact of our business on the environment to increasingly now much more about how our businesses are impacted from the environment, right? So that causality relationship impact of the environment to our businesses has become a lot more prominent with the likes of climate change. You also have the likes of TNFD standards coming up as well. These are all, new topics even for large organizations like ourselves. So I'll share with you later on how we try to internalize these conversations by being as true as possible to the science that is available to us, the best available science to us at this current juncture, and how we are also trying to put into practice internally some of these, or teach ourselves essentially through more informed conversations internally. And then the third bullet point, of course, is obviously these top two dimensions have a profound impact on business strategy going forward. Today, sustainability is no longer a buzzword. It's a must do. It's the bare minimum already. As a small business, even if you do not think of it, approaching this in a very serious manner, your clients, your bankers, your capital providers, everyone, the agenda is moving only in one direction, and it's so steep. The learning curve is extremely steep. For us, we've always tried to keep maybe about 2-3 years ahead of the horizon to sort of make sure that we have enough lead time for us to implement what could be coming our way. And so we've always tried to do a little bit more research to sort of just keep ourselves abreast and give ourselves some leeway as as the landscape continuously evolves, right? And so it's not just the business strategy, especially for us now that we've made a net zero commitment to 2050, but it's also how this could actually lead to change management within the organization. So it leads to organizational strategy changes as well. Do we have the right people, the right skill sets? So, internally, are the departments set up correctly? Because previously the silos were organized differently. Today, sustainability cuts across. Are our colleagues well equipped enough to understand their own respective dimensions in terms of how sustainability, accountants need to understand sustainability these days as well, right? So it impacts everyone within the organization. So I think these were the three big major highlights that we wanted to, or drivers that we wanted to, to put forth this morning. Hopefully, I'll cover a lot of this in the upcoming slides. I'll share this with you as well, right? So back in April 2021, the MCCG, the Malaysian Code of Corporate Governance the update was introduced, and boards now are required to convene and deliberate on the organization's sustainability performance, if in a more regular manner. And so if the board needs to convene every 6 months or every quarter, this compels management to have that same conversation on a monthly basis, because we need to act on some of these things before it goes to the board. So the performance management is very, very serious. So this is the the earlier part about the data, where internally, and I would recommend this to everyone here as well. Don't just look at sustainability purely from that compliance way, but it very much needs to be internalized as well to help us move that needle as an organization. Otherwise, if it's purely compliance, you won't get the full benefit of it, but everyone has to start somewhere. And if you need to go through that compliance journey, then you have to do that. That's a must. But if you can transition very quickly out of that into a more advanced stage of actually internalizing sustainability, then you get I would say, get the full benefit of the conversation being richer. It's no longer just how we do commercially, how well we do commercially in the organization, but it's also how it's a more holistic conversation, I would say, that takes place internally. So this is a sample of a dashboard that we are actually currently building, and we are trying to roll out by the end of this year, where you will see, or rather, we are having this dashboard at the group level, at each division, and as well as each entity level as well. So this is an example of some of the factories that we have under the industry division. You'll see on the left all the performances of the current factories broken down, and then on the top right, the factory person will also, or the division level, they will also see how their factories are performing versus the other factories that we have, versus the other subdivisions that we have as well. So they have a comparative view because it's not easy for us to compare against our peers. There's no such data available. We compare against ourselves, against the internal peer group, as well as against past year performance. But this is again new, so there is not much of a past year performance to compare against. We're building that. The dashboards have been set up to be quite intuitive. If you see the donut shapes, this is, for example, scope 1. The composition of the donut shape is intuitively, if a project manager sees this, they intuitively know that the composition needs to shift towards more green, for example, or more yellow, for example. So it's easy for them to communicate to their people. So when we map this data internally as well, we don't just map it to data providers, we map them to data owners as well. So it's important that the managers, the factory managers themselves have access to this data, are responsible for this data. And as you see towards the bottom, there is even a target line as well that we are trying to implement as well. So this is, again, then as part of our overall commitment to net zero by 2050. This has to translate to an annual target that is then going to be put into a KPI setting for project managers, for factory managers, project managers, and the likes internally. How are they performing versus the theoretical target? This again is learning for us because we've never done this before. We don't even know if the target is reasonable to set as a KPI. So all this is still a work in progress. It may take us years to actually get to a proper way of measuring, but nonetheless, it's a journey that we have committed to undertake. One, I'll share this with you as well, right? So this is you can find this in our annual report. We did a very thorough, as I mentioned, climate assessment, and in that climate, so it's two parts, right? So there's a climate risk assessment, and then there is a carbon reduction assessment point. So these two parts go hand in hand, which I'll cover later. For this, when we did our carbon assessment, we from the get-go recognized that scope 3 was going to be our biggest problem and the biggest contributor as well to our carbon footprint. There are many companies out there that will have stopped at scope 1 and 2, which is fair. Scope 3 is very, very difficult to get data and reliable data from, but we kind of knew that was going to be the problem. And so if you look at our profile for FY23, this is our baseline year that we've set. So we did a reference year for FY22 first, but FY23 is the year that we set as our baseline year because that's the first year where we have all 12 months out of COVID and no more lockdowns and such, no more disruption. So this is a normalized year of data. If you see that pie chart on the left, scope 3 constitutes 90% of our carbon emissions is in scope 3. And 90, if you look at the next,
Shane, you're breaking up actually, Shane. Your voice is breaking up. I think it's the bandwidth. Try again, Shane. Hi, Shane.
Sorry.
Oh, not coming clearly. Such an interesting presentation and we cannot hear you. I'm so sorry. Hi, Shane. Oh, I think he had to leave and come back in again. Let's see, do I see him on the screen? I don't. Now I'm wondering, because we're also running out of time, we need Mr. Chan to also give his presentation. Farah, if you can help me out, Farah, in our personal group, let Shane know that we're going to let Mr. Chan take on now. And Shane can complete his presentation after. I'm so sorry, but I don't want to keep the audience waiting. So, Mr. Chan, is that okay for you to share your screen and start yours? I know it's in the mid-journey of Shane's presentation.
Yeah, it's all right with me, Resma.
All right. So, dear audience, I'm sorry about this, but you know how the internet always gets in the way and causes issues to each and every one of us. We will definitely get Shane back on to complete his presentation. It was really very interesting, and I believe all of us want to know about their adoption journey. However, we can now have a listen to Mr. Chan Huan Ong, who is the Assistant General Manager for IJM IBS. I think you can explain IBS to everyone, but I believe you're one of the Scope 3 parts of the whole ESG adoption journey, and you can share your journey as well in facilitating this. Over to you, Mr. Chan.
Yeah, thank you, Resma. Let me share my screen.
Oh, yes, I also need to know, I will ask Shane as well, Mr. Ben Ong and Mr. Chan, will you be able to share your presentation slides, or is this not shareable? Because some of the audience would like the slides shared.
It's all right, I can share, no problem.
Okay, thank you. Over to you.
If you want to continue.
Oh.
Okay, Shane's back on. All right, sorry about that, Mr. Chan.
No problem, no problem.
All right.
Let me just.
Sorry, Shane, we didn't know how long we'd have to wait, so we thought.
I'm glad you went ahead, actually. Let me just try and share this very quickly.
Yeah, and then I'll just let you know, because we're running a bit fast, you know, in terms of time is really passing quite quickly. So just to keep you, so that, you know, there's enough time for Mr. Chan as well. Yeah.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great. Yeah, so where was I? I hope we managed to cover the 90% of
yeah, you were at the part where you were talking about Scope 3 making up 90%, and some companies not really looking at Scope 3, just Scope 1, Scope 2, and you were then going deep into Scope 3, and we lost you. So
yeah, and the point here is that 90% of our carbon emissions come from Scope 3, 90% of that comes from one category, and 90% of that comes from just 3 items: cement, steel, and concrete. So you can see that in a very large way, this reliance, or this being true to the data, gave us a very much more accurate perspective and meaningful outcome in terms of coming up with the appropriate strategy to address our carbon footprint, rather than just doing a scope 1 and 2 and stop there, right? So I'll give you a sense, an example as well. Prior to this, when we looked at, on a high level basis, we thought that putting up solar panels on all our roofs would actually move the needle. If you look at the pie chart on the left, scope 2 is 6% of our total carbon emissions. Emissions avoided from solar panels is 0.6% of this total, right? So it doesn't even move the needle for us. Without having, the point here that I want to make is, without having proper data, you may be coming up with the wrong strategy to address. So I think I also want to touch on the verification or the reliance on this data as well. What we've done is, because this was the baseline year, we got, as at the bottom there, you can see, we got BSI to sort of give us a third-party verification that, according to ISO 14064, our baseline year emissions are reliable and can be relied upon, essentially. So they did an assessment mainly focusing on us using the correct methodologies, adopting the correct references, but a lot of it was supplemented also in terms of accuracy of the data by our internal audit team as well, because they can then go into the, can do a much more extensive review of our data. So it's trying to complement what resources that they already have, right? Obviously, as a group of engineers, then being true to the SBTI, and this is, again, apologies. So SBTI is a science-based targets initiative where it's essentially the global standard. The science tells us that every organization needs to actually reduce a certain level of scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3 by a certain year in order for us to all collectively meet the 1.5 degree threshold. And so following this science was pretty important for us, but it was also very, very challenging as well. So we used it as a reference to see where the gaps are, how we differed from it, essentially. And you can see here in our strategy as well. For scope 1, having done the assessment, we thought, okay, it's doable. We can, reduce our scope 1 to 0 by 2050. For scope 2, the science says you got to actually put in 100% renewables by 2030, which is, we thought was a little bit challenging. So we gave ourselves 5 years more. So ours was a commitment to 2035. For scope 3 is very interesting, right? Because for us, given the scale of scope 3, as you saw from the earlier slide, and this is in fact the biggest deviation that we have from the SBTI recommendation, but it's also a very necessary one where we split our scope 3 commitments into two. The embodied carbon, which is what you saw earlier, the 90% for category 1, that is more of an engagement target that we set for ourselves, at least in the earlier years. Whereas the operational carbon from scope 3 is something that we've also committed to a reduction target together with scope 1 and 2. So we split scope 3. And why was this necessary? It's because we could not put our shareholder value at risk by making a reduction commitment for the embodied part of scope 3 on such a large aspect that we have actually very little control of. So it was really important for us to make sure that we do not jeopardize our shareholders' value, at the same time making a commitment that was meaningful yet an honest one, something that we felt we could do. So I won't go into this part. This is something that we all contend with. The various standards and guidelines out there, unfortunately, it's all necessary. But I think pick ones that apply to your business, to your markets. Some of them apply to all of us, of course, but get on that journey quickly. But my main message here is, again, not to see this as a compliance, but to use these standards, to use these guidelines as a means to develop your own sustainability maturity within the organization. Let me go on to the other ugly aspect of climate, right? So if we all reduce our carbon footprint, or all the efforts collectively, if we add them up today, where do we stand? Where do we stack up as a world, right? And the UN has a emissions gap report that comes out every October. The last one that came out, obviously, was a very sober one. It said there is no credible pathway to 1.5 degrees currently in place. That means we are going to be hitting. So according to the IPCC, which is the global authority of scientists that comes up and recommends policies for governments around the world, policymakers around the world. The IPCC scenario, in all scenarios, we will hit this 1.5 degrees by the year or by the 2030s, right? Depending on which curve we're at, the earlier part of 2030s or the later part of 2030s. At this current juncture, there's a clock, it's 9 years away. What does 1.5 degrees mean, right? So obviously we're already seeing some of the consequences or the extreme weather impacts already today at 1.1, 1.2 degrees. at 1.5 degrees, this is a level where the scientists are telling us that it's a danger level where even they can not really predict what goes on after that as well. So this is a threshold where it's a safety threshold that they highly recommend us not to breach. It's happening in 2030s, right? So because of this, the next threshold is the 2 degrees threshold, but that's a lot more consequential, of course, to business. And so this is that second aspect of the second bullet point that I wanted to make, which is that the outside-in risk that is presented from the environment has become very consequential for us to deal with, because these are measures that require a longer lead time for us. It's climate change is coined as the perfect problem. If you read some articles and some books, it's got so many nuances, so many dimensions to it that it's very hard to address properly, and that's why we're in this position today, right? But nonetheless, because of this, so this guides us into the next slide, and I'll give you a sense. So when we did our climate assessment over the last 1.5 years, what we found to be quite interesting, or at least for me, prior to this, if you ask me, was sea level rise something that I was worried about? Of course, that was top of my concern. But having done this, and it still is, of course, but it has a much longer lead time, or a much later consequence compared to heat waves, for example, because of the position of our country. It's on the tropic, it's on the equator. Heat waves stood out when we did our climate assessment, and this is very challenging because what does this mean? So I'll give you a sense, right? So the heat index, or the wet bulb temperature of 35 degrees is supposed to be the, you can Google this as well, it's supposed to be the tolerance level for human beings. And beyond this, for prolonged hours, even the fittest of us will run the high risk of having severe heat strokes as well. And based on the SSP2 and SSP5 scenario planning, this is the two scenarios that we used to apply for a physical risk assessment. If you look at Selangor or even Kuala Lumpur, this is again data from the IPCC's website. So if it goes into this level of granularity, based on the SSP2, if you look at Selangor, for example, and this is the moderate or median scenario, SSP2, we had 18 days of Selangor hitting the 35-degree heat index. In 20 years' time, this goes up to 11 days, and then so on, right? So what does this mean? It means that in 20 years' time, if the science is correct, in 20 years' time, outdoor activity, which our business is highly dependent on, in fact, the country is very dependent on outdoor economic activity, there's a severe impact on economic productivity going forward if we don't plan. And this is, coming our way, whatever we do. You can manage it a little bit, but it's coming our way, right? So highly consequential. What do we do? What's the risk? But the challenge that we had was this is a very systemic risk in nature. The risk assessments that we carried out were a bit more direct to the organization. So we carried risk assessments on sea level rise, drought, flooding, landslide, marine sedimentation, heat stress. Some of them, like this, has a little bit more complexities in assessing the risk to our, the direct risk to our business, because this could impact our employees more than the business itself. Again, why do I say that? Because if human beings who can adapt, who are better at adapting to such a scenario, are going to struggle, what more plants and animals, right? So food sources become highly a concern, where food inflation we're already seeing it, but it's here to stay, right? So it's not a demand-driven food inflation, it's a deficiency of adequate food security or food sources in such a scenario. So again, it's having these kind of scenarios captured and discussed in our enterprise risk management processes as well, that we try to educate, try to practice the conversation amongst our colleagues, amongst our bosses, amongst the board, on what we can do, how do we address climate risk. And all this, I would say, is free. You can get them from the Bank Negara website, actually.
Yeah, I
It's
was
all there.
gonna ask you, Shane, because a lot of the audience want to have a copy of your slide deck. So if that is okay,
Yeah, sure.
you can share your slide deck with them.
Yes,
Okay.
I have shared it with the yesterday. I think you can.
Yeah, so it's we can share it with the audience, members of the audience. Yeah, perfect.
Yeah. So I'm almost at the end. This is an example, for example, how I've removed a lot of the information that a bit more specific, that's internal, but to give you a sense, like coastal flooding, how do we actually put it into our enterprise risk management register and talk about them, discuss them. Right? So you can see it's with proper assumptions, as objective data as possible. We draw reference, because if Malaysia doesn't have it, then what's the next best? So we go, we use Singapore as a reference. Singapore's got plenty of data. Use proxies in a sense, measure them against our, in the next column, the assets, the products, the services that it could impact, and then what kind of impact, and then the severity and likelihood of these impacts as well. So it's again teaching ourselves. So this is a journey. We've done a lot in the last 1.5 years, but we're still learning and we're still familiarizing ourselves to have an internal conversation on such things, right? And then lastly, our strategy. Why did we come up with a R2O? So the R stands for reduction as well as resilience. And the 2.0 is basically a reduction to zero, which is net zero commitment, as well as resilience in a net zero world as well. So it addresses both the mitigation and the adaptation aspects hand in hand. We are, as a collective, as a world, we are having this conversation 20 years too late already. So it's become very consequential that we can no longer just have one side of the conversation. It has to be both sides hand in hand. Both are equally important. And so we've put them down. I think you can read in the interest of time. I won't go into too much detail, but essentially, we are applying our engagement with supplier, or at least we want to apply the same engagement with our suppliers, not just to tell them to reduce their carbon footprint, but to also help them understand why they should reduce. Because if they see it as a compliance, they'll never do it properly, and they themselves will never have a thorough climate assessment or climate risk assessment. And so we need to share this as much as we can across our value chain, across industries, to sort of all learn and quickly, there's not much time. We have to quickly all get to grips with, very complex information and conversations. So I would just end the presentation by saying that we need to recognize the urgency as well as the agency as a strategic lever for us to address climate change. Work using data, get as comprehensive as possible a climate profile of your organizations, and then also, don't just see it as a compliance topic.
Thank you very much, Shane. You clearly have shown the power of data, because it was so interesting. We were going, in your presentation, and then suddenly if anyone was looking at my face, they would have noticed how upset I was getting after I saw that data. To think that my children, my grandchildren will have to suffer with the consequences, as you mentioned. We've already been sitting for too long to get this done. But at least I know I can sleep well at night knowing that large companies like yours, like IJM, has shared, and the importance of data and looking at exactly where the highest level of emission comes from. And it's not just telling, but supporting it with hard, clear data is honestly very, very important in order to get people on the same wavelength and to get everybody, on board with this. It was really good. Thank you, despite that little technological disruption we had. Thank you so much, Shane.
Thank you.
Yeah, so now let's call upon Mr. Chan. Mr. Chan, Shane has given you very little time. So you have to explain your end, how you are facilitating the whole corporate strategy as a Scope 3 vendor and all of this. And we look forward to hear on your end. Ms. Chan, please, the floor.
Okay. Thank you. Let me share my screen. I try to move fast as possible, so I cut short on the greetings. Good morning, everyone. I mean, to the moderators, to MASSA and MAPAN. So I will jump right straight to my slide. So today I'm sharing this. The title of my slide is Advancing Sustainable Construction with Smart IBS. So today I will start with the four major contents of my slide. First is construction industry in Malaysia at a glance. So I will briefly explain on what have we progressed since our independence, that the status of our construction industry. Are we still, how far can we go, and where are we now? And secondly, it will be on the precast concrete system and DFMA. So why precast concrete system or smart IBS? That's how I term it, that promotes sustainability. Number three will be smart IBS is a way forward, flexible, adaptable, and efficient. Why is it so? And lastly, will be on the project showcase, some of the projects that are completed using our smart IBS solutions, then how green that it can be. So first of all, at a glance, so we look at this graph, this chart, to show that we have been relying on this conventional construction method since Independence Day, like 50, 60 years ago. Until today, you can still see that we're importing a lot of foreign laborers from Bangladesh, from all the countries that carry out a lot of these manual works, cutting the timber, bending the steel bar on site. And if you have noticed, the way the housing that used to house them is actually very low standard, and we have gotten into some issue in how we house these foreign workers in on the project site. So there's a big issue I think 2 years ago, and government has actually imposed this to be more stringent, and we imposed this Act 446 to have a standard, more livable conditions for these foreign workers. And then we as a whole, the construction industry also has moved on to rely more on the system formwork. So, but this still will be very labor intensive. And IJM group, that we took this decision to invest into this IBS solution, actually to increase one of the challenges facing the industry is a low productivity, because we rely a lot more on the manual works instead of the machines to carry out this the construction work in the factory setting. So where should we be now? Actually, we at the moment, the government also pushing a lot into promoting this IBS through CIDB and as well as JKR. So they also come out with the national policy construction 4.0 to, in a way, try to mandate more adoptions of IBS. And we look at the neighboring country like Singapore, they have gone far ahead into this precast or IBS that they have started using, I think 20 plus years ago. And now they move forward into a modular constructions. So meaning that the house, actually, you can build a house with a complete setting, with the furniture, with the services, with the tilings, with the tiling completed, with the painting completed, all the essential services completed, and just delivered to the site and hoist it up and connect. So I believe this should be the way that we should be aspired to do. So this is how we can increase the productivity in the factory setting. And IBS construction method and its benefits. So it's an overall overview of this why the government is pushing this the construction industry towards this method of construction. First of all, will be the improvement in the productivity. Of course, when we do it in the factory setting, we can have better environment, and then we can plan the work well, and so we can increase the productivity. That's why a lot of products is really being produced in the factory, so we can plan the process well, that so we can get a high productivity out of it. And control construction quality and environment. this is also another given. So in the factory setting, we will draft up this SOP, so the workers can follow these processes, and we can have better quality control. And last but most importantly will be the reduce of this construction waste. As we know that the construction actually generated a lot of this waste, like you can see a lot of spillage of this ready-mix concrete on the road. So imagine that we shift all this ready-mix into the factory setting. So whatever we deliver is a finished product, so we can have avoiding this a lot of these wastages being produced on site. And come to the second part. So smart IBS and DFMA. DFMA actually means that it's designed for manufacturing assembly, because we know that the construction projects, building, for example, every project is different. The design of every project building is different. So we face the issue when the government face the issue of challenges of pushing the adoptions of IBS, is because they try to standardize the design of the buildings of a house, which as of now, if you leave it a private developer, it's actually quite difficult, because every architect, they try to, we want to increase the appeal of this building to the home buyer. So standardized design is a complicated process. So that's why we invested into this smart IBS solution, that we can make use of this technology to custom-made the building components that complying to a DFMA, and we can serve every developer, the needs of every architect. So to give a glance of where we are now in terms of the precast technology in Malaysia. So in Malaysia at the moment, if you are in the construction industry, you know that precast structural frame, beam column is very commonly used in Malaysia, especially for those fast-track project factories and whatnot. So basically, the frame consists of beam column, and then you can see a lot of this in between this beam and column, they'll still lay up with the brickworks. So again, this is also still very labor intensive. Why this method is popular at the moment is because relatively compared to the wall and slab, beam and column is easier to make, and also it can standardize the dimensions. So standardizing of dimensions is what will be one of the key words in terms of moving into the precast or smart IBS solutions. So it comes to a precast wall panel. So Malaysia also, there are few developers and supplier are supplying this precast wall panel. So they do it more on the more basic manners. You can see the houses consists of all the walls, and there'll be no beam and column. So it produces on-site outdoor panel casting, and to do this, the challenges faced by the precursor or developer will be how to make sure that I get enough cycle out of the steel mold that prepare for this project, because as we know that every housing project is different. So one typical housing project probably requires 50, 60, or even up to 100 different wall panel dimension and sizes. So you create the challenges of how to make efficient use of this steel mold that they bought for the particular project. So the assembly work will be still relatively the same. So after they produce, it just erect up. And one of the challenges I also want to highlight is because they produce on outdoor casting. So normally, this one typical outdoor casting yard will be serving for one or maximum two projects because of the complexity involved in the productions of the different sizes of the wall panel. Then comes to our investment into this IBS. So the concept is still the same. We are going into this wall and slab system. So, but in between the processes, we are utilizing a lot of this technology. For example, we're using this building information modeling. It's also software driven. Our entire process is actually digitally driven. So first of all, we have to model out the building in the 3D. So from there, we break down to each individual panels that can be lifted up on site that we can custom it to catering to the lifting requirements. Then we have this logistic arrangement with a smart QR code system that we can identify and pre-arrange the panels so that you deliver, when we deliver to site, that you know that you're just following the sequencing of which wall to erect first. This will be one clear analog. Will be example will be like you bought the IKEA furnitures, so you have assembly books, so you know that they itemize this each component 1, 2, 3, so you know what to do. First you have to start with parts 1, part 2, and etc. Then comes to manufacturing. We're also utilizing this robotic system to ensure the precision as well of each panel produced. And from there, because it's all software driven, our factory will be able to cater for many projects. Actually, essentially, there's no limitation on the number of projects we can take because it's all the different elements will be tagged using this software as well as the QR code. So it comes to the on-site assembly, that will be actually the easiest part. Once we completed the design beam manufacturing, going to the site, you all need minimum workers to do the assembly. And as well as we also have this tracking-based installation, meaning that once you install the panels, the contractor can actually monitor the progress by asking the workers to scan on the QR code because the information will be updated via cloud into the BIM model. So thirdly, smart IBS is a way forward for Malaysia because if you look at the neighboring country, Singapore, Thailand, even Philippines, they already embarked on this solution, not to mention the advanced country like Europe and China and other countries, that this is a way forward for them because labor wages is getting higher and we cannot just keep importing these foreign workers to come and do this low productivity works. And we are, this hard-earned currency is being go back to the country, and that's why we have to find ways to boost up our exchange rate and uplift this living standard of our local people. So smart IBS, this is at a glance. This is our group commitment to usher in the area of these sustainable constructions. We are connecting the digital and the physical construction under the factory setting. So we completed in the late last year, late 2021. So with this factory setting, we are capable of, we can have this 2,500 homes of output capacity with the use of less than 100 workers. Imagine this 2,500 homes, if we were to build in the conventional method, I would say that you will perhaps need thousands of workers. So now we can reduce significantly the number of workers to less than 100, but at the same time still delivering the same output. So this smart IBS solution is also the pillar of a sustainable development under CIDP Construction 4.0 and National Construction Policy of 2030. So in terms of the productivity is one of the highest construction productivity rate compared with the cast in situ, system formwork, and etc. And one of the key points is we can handle many projects at any one time. So there are 4 key components of our smart IBS solution. Like I say, the brain behind the entire operation is all digital solutions. So we are utilizing the software digitalization to boost the productivity and to enable the mass customization of our building components. Then it comes to this manufacturing system. It's all IoT and robotic assisted. So the machine will read the data from the software, and then you will build this manufacture this element precisely. Intelligent storage and delivery system will ensure that all elements delivered will be tailored, made to the particular day, particular floor, so that ensure that the productivity is not being sacrificed on site, because this is the utmost important thing that the contractor will want to ensure daily output on site. I mean the construction productivity. And lastly will be the precision installation. So this is the work of a main contractor to monitor the site progress. So this is an outlook of our this entire automated carousel precast concrete system. There are total 9 processes. If we have the honor, we can arrange one day for the participant to come to my factory and
that would be very nice. We would love to do that. Definitely, we'll organize something.
Yeah, I think that will help to make sure that everyone understand that how this thing that it really can change the way that we build. So there are 3 key components of our solutions. First thing is robots, plotting and shuttering robots, where we can just ensure the building components, because every building component has to be precisely made. We don't want any building component reach the site that you can't fit. For example, another good example would be like you buy IKEA furniture. If your part 1 it does not fit into part 2, I think next time you don't want to go to IKEA and say, no, I don't trust them because they are not delivering the right solution for me. So this is what we are trying to do. We are investing in these solutions that to ensure that every panel is precisely made. If we were to go back to the earlier, on this open yard casting, less robots, so the complaints will be, it still depends on the labels. Maybe sometimes you may not get the kind of precision. So in terms of for the construction industry, the precision is very important. So conventional precast, we need the repetitions in order to get the economical scale. With our investment into this smart IBS solution, we can get mass customization at the same cost. So because every panel has to be custom made using a reusable formwork. So that's why we can make it competitive. And the next will be the automated mesh machines. So every reinforcement or every mesh that produced inside our factories, I would say with the minimum wastages, because there's no cutting required to create the openings. Unlike conventional, you buy the mesh at the standard size. So if you need to cut out this mesh for this window panels, you have to cut it manually on site. So whereas we custom made every mesh, so we can do away of these wastages. Again, I touch on the intelligent logistic installation management. This will be more concern of our partners and the contractors that they want to ensure the productivity on site. So complete building solution from our smart IBS solutions. So our smart IBS system consists of essentially every element of be it a landed house or high-rise condominium, or even some of the projects we completed even fit in between this conventional constructions. So it all boils down to the engineering ingenuity of our team, that we can find a right solution to tailor made for every building projects. You can see here we can have apart from the precast beam column, which is fairly standard, we have a solid wall panel, solid slab, staircase, house slab, as well as we also can custom it to have a precast pattern wall. What you see the precast with the Malaysian map, this is not a digital photos, it's actually a real wall panel. It's we erected up in our factories, so you can come and have a look. Apart from there, we also innovate on assisting this smart IBS platform. So we go on this sustainable construction product, bubble deck slab, where the use of this plastic ball to reduce the use of concrete. So a bit of introduction on bubble deck slab. You see the background picture, the black balls is a plastic. So why the black balls is used? It's actually to reduce the use of concrete, because this is from engineering terms that those concrete for a slab system, concrete in between the slab actually is it gives the weight, but it does not perform as a structural solution. So there are many other slab solutions out there actually to find ways to reduce the weight and still maintaining the strength and the stiffness of the slab. So we have some data here. For every 5,000 meters square of bubble slab, we can save up to quite a fair bit of this concrete on site. And when we save the concrete used on site, we also can reduce the foundation loads. So that will also reduce the number of ready-mix trucks, lorry trips to site, as well as the, of course, ultimately it ties back to the CO2 emission. So there are some project showcase. I will
yeah. Mr. Chan, do you think you can complete your presentation in a minute?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
I will just quickly go through the project showcase. So basically, I want to tell to the participants that with these solutions, we only need minimum manpower on site. For example, so the project that you see here, 5,000 meters square, we can complete in a month with the use of 7 manpower. The next one, also the same. We got done accuracy 85% with the minimum use of the manpower, 7 workers on site. Like this 3-story building with the innovative facade completed in a month, 7 workers. Lastly will be this bubble slab project. So 6-story, 30,000 meters square, completed in 3.5 months, and 4 workers needed, beamless soffit. So 4 workers needed, as you can see here. And big or small project, like say we have this smart IBS solution, we can tailor-make for any project of any size. So I will skip on the green because Shane I touched a lot more on this. Yeah, and lastly, our product are certified green. We have a CM Eco Label certification. We also are certified Malaysia under this National Green Procurement Policy. And that's wrap up my presentation.
Thank you. So IBS means what? Intelligent building systems, or does it mean
industrialized buildings system?
Industrialized buildings.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting because from the design stage, that means whoever wants to build whatever, it goes into your design modeling software to tell you what would be the most lean method and safest method to come up with, I would say, like prefabricated parts to the building, right? And it also takes into account the build of that means the little bits and pieces that get into to make up a whole. How do you actually reduce your transportation costs so that you can fully optimize the space on a truck in terms of space and weight? So it's brilliant. And then the fact that it continues with robotics as well in the manufacture of these built up like panels, as you have shown, right down to the assembly, which means the execution of building the whole thing. What is the take-up rate? Excuse me on my ignorance in this. Construction is not my area. But what is the take-up rate with this kind of technology? It may sound like it sounds expensive, but in the long run, it's actually a lot of cost saving. You really reduce a lot of waste in this. What's the take-up rate? Yeah.
Okay, the take-up rate is rather, I receive a lot of this interested, there are many people that are interested in these solutions. Of course, I must say that after you see my setup, the investment, they are quite a hefty investment, but we are here to, but we know that this investment is going to be huge, but we are looking into more long-term long-term strategy that we because the conventional construction cost is keep on going up. Even after this COVID, I also heard many contractors come to tell me that actually they have no choice but to look into this solution because the wages is not coming down, and those
exactly. And then, for example, you're able to build a house a building with 7 people. It's amazing the number you showed your projects in 1 month, in 3 months, you're setting up a whole operation. So if you take all that into account, it may cost a lot to adopt it, to start with this, but in the long run, there's a lot of cost savings in this. Am I right to say that?
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you very much. So now, shall we start with the Q&A session? Because we got very little time. I'm going to probably ask each of you one question only, if it's okay. Do you mind dropping your screen share, Mr. Chan?
Yeah, sure.
If it's okay? Yeah, just drop it. And then maybe if we can get all our panel members on the screen. Okay, excellent. All three are there. Thank you so very much. You know, one thing is, it's interesting. Time does not permit for us to learn more, although I would love if we could have another session, especially with regards to learning a lot more from what IJM is doing. It's really impressive in all ways, even right down to the deployment of the development in the construction business. So thank you so much. Let's first get one question out to Ben, because we're running out of time. So if any of you in the panel, because when I noticed in the Q&A box, many of you, pretty much the questions were if you could get the slideshow. So yeah, we will be sharing the slideshow with the list of attendees. Secondly, you wanted the video, so we're going to be loading it up on the YouTube channel of ours, and then we'll share the link. And there's one question first I'm going to take out from the audience, asking Mr. Chan, may I know the cost for building, will the cost for building be higher or lower with smart IBS? I think we just spoke about it, isn't it?
Yes. But I still want, maybe I just explain further.
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Okay, maybe we just refer to our neighbor country. If the, for example, Singapore, if the use of precast is higher than the conventional, why Singapore government is still mandate the use of this solution? I think that's a question we have to ask ourselves. Not just the government, but also have to ask ourselves. But like what Resma has clearly indicated, that with this solution, we can definitely cut down the construction time on site. So we are here to actually to look for partners, and that how do we quantify the shortening of time that can contribute back to.
I would look at the leanness of this. It is so lean that it because of your modeling system, you know, your BIM.
Yeah.
That already tells you everything, like how much you need for what,
yes.
and how and which pretty much, you know, reduces waste, reduces trips that have to be done constantly, and that's there, you know. So thank you so much, Chan. But now let's go to an ESG question. That was more like a cost question. And I'll put this question out to Ben. Ben, you told us in your presentation, thank you very much with giving us the insights about ESG and all that. And then you did mention that PLCs have to go on board, right? That's mandated by the government. And because PLCs have to get on board, that's going to drive MSMEs into adopting ESG. What would you say on both perspectives? Let's start with the MSME, because they're the large bunch of people. What would be the biggest challenge they grapple with, in your opinion? And what should they do in order to address that? If you can give a really quick answer.
Okay, thank you. Before that, maybe I just make one comment about this IBS system. In terms of the IBS construction itself, I think it's more expensive. But if you take into consideration total cost, then yes, it is the right choice to go forward. Just a comment, because I was also involved in construction.
All right, thanks, Ben.
Coming back to the ESG, there are two things here. Number one is currently ESG is voluntary, and it affects the PLC, not the MNC, not the GLC, not the GIC, not the large corporate. Yeah, they only affect the PLC. But having said that, although it is voluntary, in effective terms, it is actually mandatory, because the PLC cannot report, cannot make up their disclosure without asking the scope 3 emission. Like it or not, then it becomes compulsory. Although it's voluntary, and only mandatory for the PLC. But since so many MSME, are working.
Yeah, I mean, we are the ones
as a contractor
exactly.
or whatever.
They're the
so it become compulsive. Although not compulsory, but it's compulsive.
But what would you think, Ben, would be the biggest challenge for them? Because clearly from Shane's presentation, we've seen how important data is. Do you think that is the part where the MSME may be trapped in terms of...
That's why I repeat this background again, to provide, the justification, as to what MSME must do and what PLC must do. Because at the end of the day, if one don't do or one sits on the laurel, then nothing will happen. So as far as MSME is concerned, they have to start collecting data. Because like what Sheng has mentioned and so-called emphasized clearly, without data, you have no direction.
Exactly. You can't
so
make
data collection is important. That's why on MAPAN's level, we're trying also to come up with a simple integrated reporting software.
Exactly. I think that
whereby
would be
the MSME can just input, and then the back-end engine will do the analysis, and then you will calculate into the disclosure reporting. So it makes life easy for MSME. That's one way. The other is, as far as the PLC is concerned, they have to start moving a vendor's development program on ESG compliance, because it must start with compliance first. Yes, we have to go beyond compliance, but if they do not know the rules, nothing to start with. That's my response. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So what's interesting is that MAPAN's coming up with something, right? Because a lot of the MSMEs are trying to see, trying to like pretty much shooting in the dark, trying to see which data. We're all doing things. I'm sitting here and also thinking, I run a training company. I'm also sitting, oh yeah, I can start with this. I've already done that. I can do that. But how do I get the data? How do I report? How do I monitor? So that's excellent. And you're right. PLCs, because at the end of the day, they're going to depend on the MSMEs. So as, again, Shane, I will keep saying your name all this time. As you have said, engagement, and as you said, Ben, engagement with your vendors. Your vendors need to understand, they need to be trained, they need to understand the reasoning behind this. There needs to be a buy-in for them, which then again, the PLCs will have to share the data that they have collected on their level that can be, then shared with the MSMEs who are going to be handling the scope 3, for example. Thank you so much, Ben, for that. Shane, now it's time for me to ask you a question. And 2 questions. One is the audience wants to know if they want to get a hold of you, how do they do that? So are we allowed to share your email address, or would you like them to send their questions to us and then we'll get in contact with you?
Because of my other job of investor relations, my name is on the annual report, my contacts on the website. You can easily Google, I think, and get me. But yeah, sure, you can feel free to share.
Excellent. So there you go. We already have Mr. Shane already telling you guys you can contact him directly. So Shane, your question though, there's always these naysayers around, people, who think ESG is woke. Don't ask me why, but they keep talking about all this leads up. It's all greenwashing. It's all greenwashing. So how do companies actually ensure that the data that they're giving and whatever that they're doing is not so much greenwashing? Maybe you want to share that.
Yeah, thanks, Rishma. I know it's greenwashing has become very consequential actually in developed countries like the UK. Even advertising has, they've come up with guidelines on what can be advertised, how green can you say your product is, and it's actually become, legal cases and the likes as well. So we have to be all quite careful. I think the landscape is not as developed here in a developing country like ours. But I must say that from a large corporate standpoint, the pressure to show that you're doing something is also very great. as well. I think all of us have to be quite careful, firstly, of not over-representing in the first place. So that's really critical. I think especially of product labeling and all that, it will become very consequential if we, I don't think it applies to our business, we're a bit more B2B, but I think B2C, if your product goes around the world, it could become very consequential along the supply chain, because whatever we represent as a supplier will probably impact the customer down the supply chain to the ultimate markets, right? So regulators are clamping down very hard on greenwashing, but I would say don't worry about the greenwashing. Don't worry about the what do you call it, the advertising or the needing to show that you're doing something. I think there's so much of work required, and even if the runway is a little bit longer for your organization, I would say take the proper route. Fundamentals or the foundation work is so important, because if you don't have that, you can't go very far as well. So I would say focus on establishing what is important, how you get your organization on that board, on the journey as quickly as possible. Education, sharing sessions like this, I think are going to be very, very vital for us all to, share challenges as well as best practices, thoughts. So I would say don't greenwash, obviously.
Be truthful, because at the end of the day, you're all going to suffer the consequences of it, right?
For sure. We're already seeing it.
We're already seeing it, exactly. We've seen it. Thank you so much, Shane, for that. So there are a few other questions that has come up in our Q&A. Mr. Chan, someone wants to know that if they use the smart IBS, are they going to get any government incentives?
The answer is yes, but there's a mismatch in terms of incentive. The incentive now given to the manufacturer like us is not exactly useful. I mean, between the CIDB and REDA, we have been discussing that the incentive should be given to the developer, so to incentivize them to adopt these solutions instead of incentivize the manufacturer when there's a market.
Okay, so the incentives are going the wrong direction. I mean, good for the manufacturer, but generally for people who are in developing projects, it should be a motivator towards them.
Yes. Because the adoption here is low, so I mean, there's to find ways to.
Then something for you to voice out, then, to MAPAN. Something for you to voice out. Shane, last question for you. How did your team begin developing your sustainability framework? If you can quickly tell us that, because I know it's a long answer, but as soon as you can.
Yeah, no, I think that's really fundamental for any organization, right? So I think in the first place, if you follow GRI's, they prescribe a materiality assessment. For all organizations, it's different, right? Because we are in different parts of the world, we're in different businesses, with different stakeholders. If you have that done properly, I think you will be able to at least identify the material topics that are relevant to you, and then finally have, complement that with a internal framework of how we monitor the progress along those topics, right? So that the governance aspect comes in, and then of course, once you have the framework, you need to build a roadmap to push the agenda internally as well, so that every function in the organization also moves in the same manner. So I would say that to me is the most basic way I can put it.
Yeah, thank you a lot. So I think, Ben, something we need to talk about is what is material. People need to understand what is material to start their journey in the first place. Am I right? So that's one thing. Sometimes it's very basic stuff like this that we need to approach on a step-by-step process. So I would like to thank, we've been really impressed. Time has passed, 2 hours have passed for a 90-minute session, and we still have our audience online, which is impressive. Everybody has been very glued to the screen and have appreciated your presentations, your insight, your knowledge sharing. Thank you so very much to our panel members and our speakers today, and to our audience. And there's still a lot more to learn. So this is the first session of our ESG adoption in Malaysia. We hope to speak to other manufacturers. We now looked at the building construction industry, how they are going about it. Very impressive. There's still a lot of other sectors in the industry that we have yet to explore in our upcoming sessions. So thank you very much. And if you have any questions that you would like to ask our panel, please do send your emails. I think for those of you who have come in through MASSA, you can send it to MASSA. And those of you who have come in through CILT, you know the CILT info. You can post your questions there. And thank you very much to everyone, our audience, our panel, for this wonderful discussion we've had today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.